The subject of my talk this evening will be reincarnation and spiritual life. Reincarnation. Most ancient religions knew reincarnation to be a fact and not fiction. Or in Hinduism, reincarnation is considered a fact, not a doctrine only. And Hinduism is the most ancient living faith of this world. In the Bhagavad Gita, a scripture, popular scripture of Hinduism, we read that the Sri Krishna, the teacher, is saying to his student Prince Arjuna, in Sanskrit, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjuna tasyaham veda sarmani tat nattam vetha parantapa. That means, Arjuna, you have gone through many incarnations, many births. I know all of them, those births, but you do not know any of them. That's the difference between Arjuna and Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna is a divine incarnation, so everything is known to Krishna. But Arjuna did not remember his past incarnations. And the scriptures of Hinduism are full of references to our incarnations in the past. And an offshoot of Hinduism, which is Buddhism. Buddhism is no other than Hinduism. Buddha was no other than a Hindu. But his followers have named the teachings of Buddha Buddhism. So then was Gautama Buddha was his name, and he was born a Hindu, and he died a Hindu also. So Buddha talked about reincarnation many times. He remembered his past incarnations because he was not an ordinary soul. He was a divine incarnation, and he remembered them all. And like Sri Krishna remembered all the past births of Arjuna, his friend. But Arjuna did not remember. So in Buddhism also, Buddha talked about his reincarnation. He would talk about his own past incarnations. Let me take, for example, another religion, which is Judaism. And those who follow that religion, they are called Jews. And it is known that Philo of Alexandria, he taught about reincarnation. He would say that reincarnation is a fact. And he was born in Judaism. What about Jesus Christ? Jesus was not a Christian. He was born a Jew, and his teacher was his teacher was John the Baptist. It is John the Baptist who baptized Jesus Christ. And according to Jews, John the Baptist was a second Elijah. In his previous incarnation, he was Elijah, and then in the first incarnation, then he was reborn as Elijah. That is the second Elijah. And then Jesus was no other than a Jew. He was not a Christian. And once his followers brought a person who was born blind to Jesus and asked Jesus, "Revered Sir, this man, why was he born blind? Is it the fault of his own parents, or is it due to the fault of his own fault?" That means in previous incarnations he might have done something as a result of which he is born blind. That's what they said. At that time they believed in reincarnation. Jesus did not give any direct reply. He touched the eyes of that person, and that person's blindness was gone. Then he said his blindness was there to glorify God. Jesus was a divine incarnation. Although he had removed the blindness of that person, he did not like to tell others. He said it is God who had used him to remove the blindness of that person who was born blind. So at that time the Jews used to believe in the reincarnation. Eventually the religion called Christianity came, because there were some followers of Jesus Christ. They would call what they believed in Christianity, because they followed the instructions of Jesus Christ. From that the word Christianity came. And for some generations there were no these Christians, they believed in reincarnation, just as Judaism believed in reincarnation. Then one king named Justinian, he accepted the teachings of Jesus Christ, and it is he who banned the idea of reincarnation. That's how Christianity doesn't talk about reincarnation anymore. It was King Justinian who had banned it, or made that belief an anathema. It is not allowable. So reincarnation, the idea of reincarnation is not new. And I have been to Brazil, among other countries, on invitation many times. I've been to Brazil 7 times. What to speak of many other countries. And on everywhere I went on invitation. And there I came to know many people of Brazil. I was invited to different cities of Brazil. There I had to give talks at the request of the people who had invited me. And I had to give talks on religion and spiritual life. So, Sao Paulo, it is a city in Brazil. It is named after Saint Paul, and in Portuguese, Sao means saint and Paulo comes from the word Paul. It is named after Saint Paul. And that city I visited several times. And there was a professor, he was a great musician. His name was Professor Gomez. He lived in Sao Paulo. It is he who started a Vedanta group in Sao Paulo. And when I went there, I stayed with Professor Gomez. And Professor Gomez had allowed Swami Bhaskarananda of the Ramakrishna Order to come and teach there. Let me tell you a little bit about Swami Bhaskarananda. The Ramakrishna Order did not have any branch in South America. But then Swami Bhaskarananda of Belur Math, that was going to be sent to Brazil and Argentina. And so Bhaskarananda Swami didn't know what kind of countries those were. So he told one of the close devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta, told him that he had been selected to go there. And naturally, Swami Bhaskarananda was a little upset, thinking that he would have to go to a different country, whether that country was ready for the teaching of Sri Ramakrishna or not. He was not sure of that. Hearing that, Mahendranath Gupta said to Bhaskarananda, he said, "This is quite all right for you to go there, because Swami Vivekananda once said that in a spiritual vision he had seen the flag of Vedanta flying all over Mount Andes in South America." So the message of Hinduism will spread there also. So getting such encouragement, Bhaskarananda Swami went, and he went to Argentina, Buenos Aires. That means good air, that is the meaning of the word. So he was there. But he was a very good speaker also. So on invitation he came to Brazil and spoke in universities and other places. So Swami Bhaskarananda came to know Professor Gomez, who was professor of music actually. And there, one gentleman who was an engineer from Japan, his name was Taka. He came to repair pianos for Professor Gomez. And then he got interested in learning music, and he also became a musician, Taka. He was Japanese. And when Swami Bhaskarananda was invited by Professor Gomez to come to Sao Paulo, then Swami Bhaskarananda saw Taka. And then he said something very interesting. when he saw Taka, he said, I know you very well. I know you from your past incarnation, he said. So it so happened that Swami Vijayananda once went for a visit to Germany, and there suddenly he remembered his past incarnation. And then he remembered that he was a Catholic priest. And then when he died there, his body was buried in a certain cemetery. So when he remembered his past incarnation, he became curious to see what had happened to his cemetery. That was Swami Vijayananda. And he remembered his past incarnation. And then when he came to Brazil for a visit, then he saw Taka. And seeing Taka, he remembered that Taka was another monk who lived with him in Germany in his past incarnation. That's why he asked Taka to stay on with him. And it is he who gave him some spiritual initiation. And so Taka became a Vedantist, so to say. So I saw Taka. He was a very calm and quiet person. But I might have seen Swami Vijayananda only once when he had gone to India for a visit or something. But I don't remember him that well. So, but I saw Taka because I visited Sao Paulo center or temple many times, and Taka used to live there. And Taka in age was a little bit older than me as far as I know. And then he lived in that ashrama in Sao Paulo, and he lived a very pious life. And his death also came very peacefully. He just went to bed, and in the morning he didn't get up. In his sleep he had died. That was Taka. Did Taka remember his past incarnation? We are not sure. But Swami Vijayananda remembered his past incarnation and could recognize that Taka was his friend when he was in Germany in a Catholic church. He was a monk. And now let me talk about India. In India, I heard about a professor, a lady. She used to teach in a college, but she remembered her past incarnation. She died, but when she was reborn, she remembered her past incarnation. And then when she grew up, she remembered her husband and all, and went and looked for her husband of her past incarnation. And he could recognize him, her husband had become very old, but she could recognize her husband. She remembered her past incarnation. And I was talking about this remembering the past incarnations. So Vijay Krishna Goswami was a well-known saint of India. Once he went with some of his followers, and if I remember right, to the Puri temple. And there, in the group, there was one person who entered the temple and suddenly started crying aloud as though something very bad had happened to him. Then Vijaya Krishna Goswami comforted him anyway. Then others were curious about why that person had cried aloud, and then they asked that person. That person said that he could remember his past incarnation when he came along with his family to the temple, and he missed the members of his family. That's why he cried aloud. And Vijaya Krishna Goswami said to that person that in his previous incarnation he had visited. That is true. Vijaya Krishna Goswami was a well-known saint of India. Then in India, our monastic order runs many educational institutions, and one of them, which is quite famous, is an educational institution in a place called Narendrapur. In Narendrapur, there some colleges are there which are run by our order, schools and all these things. And for the teachers in Narendrapur, there are colonies where our order built some houses where the teachers should stay with their families. And in those teachers, in the place where the teachers stayed with their families, there was one gentleman, he was a teacher, his name was Manik Mitra. And he was a good teacher. And he had a very young daughter, and the daughter suddenly started saying that she was not a girl, she was a boy. And that amazed her parents. And that girl started saying that she was born elsewhere in a city called Bardwan, and she was born, at that time she was a boy. But in this incarnation she was reborn as the daughter of Manik Mitra. And that's why she would sometimes cry thinking of her old parents. And Manik Mitra heard all these stories, and then he mentioned that to Swami Lokeshwarananda. It is he who started that large educational institution called, which is in Narendrapur. And he talked about it to Swami Lokeshwarananda. Lokeshwarananda became curious. And where was that girl born? That according to that girl's account, she was born in a previous incarnation in Bardwan, city of Bardwan, which is about 80 miles away from Calcutta. And so, along with Swami Lokeshwarananda, Manik Mitra with his daughter went to the city. And strange, because his daughter could recognize the streets of that city, where she had never been in this life. Then eventually the daughter recognized a house and said that that was her home in her previous incarnation. And then they entered that home and surprised the owners of that home. And that daughter's name is Dolan Mitra. So Dolan Mitra saw her, the parents of her previous incarnation, and so the Swami and this Manik Mitra, they explained to the owner of that home why they had come to visit. And then they became curious. And then that girl said that in his previous incarnation he was a boy, and she took them to the room where she used to stay as a boy. She was a college student at that time. He was a college student at that time, and then he died and was reborn as Dolan Mitra, as the daughter of Manik Mitra in Narendrapur. So this is an interesting story. When we heard that story, we were curious to know what had happened to that Dolan Mitra, who, even though born as a girl, she used to think that she was a boy. And then we were informed that when that girl grew older, then her past memories went away. And then she started looking upon herself as a girl. And her name was Dolan Mitra. And she studied and all, and she married and all these stories we heard. So this is a case where reincarnation is proved to be a fact and not fiction. And also in Brazil, I met one gentleman, an elderly gentleman. He was a Christian, but he was interested in Vedanta. And he said to me that his grandmother had died and was reborn as a little girl in their family. And this little girl could remember all the things which the grandmother had done in her past, in her incarnation. And that gentleman told me all these things. And here he went, and the gentleman went and verified. But he belonged to a Christian church. So the Christian church did not believe in those stories. But I told him, no, that stories are not fictitious. Yes, it is quite possible. So the reincarnation is a fact. It is not fiction. That's what I would like to point out to you. Some rare people can remember their past incarnation. And it has to do with spiritual life. Because what does reincarnate? The scriptures of Hinduism teach us that we have two bodies. One is subtle body, the other one is gross body. The gross body consists of the muscles, bone and flesh. So when a person dies, this gross body is left behind. But the subtle body, which is composed of mind, the sense organs and motor organs and all, that remains. That subtle body resembles the gross body, but it becomes ready for another world of a different kind of vibration. We may call it the other world if you want. And so it is the subtle body which carries the impressions of the past life. And why is a person born? According to Hinduism, in order to grow spiritually. When a person is born, he goes through many experiences. And that's how he learns certain things. Then until he gets to know his divinity, he will be born again and again. And when he will get to know his divinity, then he will not be born again anymore. He will live in a plane of existence which is called Brahmaloka. That is where divinity is almost fully manifested. The Brahmaloka is also called by others Ramakrishna Loka or Christ Loka and all. That's plane of existence. There are many such planes of existence, but the highest Loka is there where there is full manifestation of divinity. And once a person goes to that plane of existence, after that he won't be reborn as a human being. Eventually he will become one with divinity. This is what I wanted to tell you. So the subject of my talk this evening was reincarnation and spiritual life. Yes, a person whose spiritual practice has become complete through the realization of that person's divinity, that person will not reincarnate. But others who are yet to grow and manifest their divinity, they will be born again and again and again. And it's they who will reincarnate. Thank you very much for your patience.